Ukraine tensions appear to be spreading. The neighboring nation of Moldova, another former Soviet republic, put its borders on alert on Monday. Let's get more on this east-west divide with Joe Hennng. He's a fellow with the Truman Project. What do you make of that last bit of information about Moldova?
Well, I think it's part of a series of events that indicate some broad spread instability throughout the region. And I think at the heart of the matter is Ukraine, though. It's a large country, very unstable, and I think everyone needs to continue to focus on that. There are a lot of other things happening around the periphery, but the main issue right now is, will Ukraine survive as a nation state?
And you were saying to me earlier that the greatest fear on your part is that it'll be a failed state. I mean, how close are we teetering on that now, or what do you think?
I think so, Mike. I think very unfortunately we've come to the point where you have a country of 46 million people that is really in jeopardy of becoming a failed state at the heart of Europe. And I think some of the lessons that we had in Iraq and Afghanistan, sadly, are suddenly relevant again as we think about how hard it is to keep together a state once you've lost the credibility and authority in the central government.
So what are those lessons? What should we have done, when I say we, the international community, to prevent what's going on right now?
Well, I think a couple of things. I mean, one, you have a government that is an interim government that did happen. It did come to power through an odd set of circumstances. We, the West, embraced that government very closely at the beginning. As I've said before, repeatedly, I think, and as I think many agree, in retrospect, perhaps a bit of distance or a bit of circumspection as that government worked towards elections might have been useful. I think we're in a difficult position now. All of us, everyone, is in a difficult position in the sense that now that the elections that have long been planned are scheduled and about to be held later this month, you have circumstances that don't really permit them to be held. You have the whole eastern part of the country not in a position to hold free and fair elections. And you have Russia, President Putin saying it would be ridiculous to go ahead with these elections. The West is placed in a very awkward position where I think the best response would be, oddly, to actually agree with President Putin in that regard and postpone the election.
Let me talk about this story that came out in a German newspaper this weekend, citing unnamed German security sources. They reported this weekend that dozens of CIA agents and Federal Bureau of Investigation agents are there in Ukraine advising the Ukrainian government on how to put down this rebellion. And in March, as you know, the U.S. strongly urged Russia to stop meddling in the affairs of Ukraine, to move out of Crimea. And so one might think this is a double standard, or is it just simply the Americans, the old idiom, what's good for the goose is good for the gander?
Well, I don't have any information about the presence of U.S. groups of any kind there, so I'm not able to comment on that directly. I would be surprised if that were the case. I think, if anything, the U.S. involvement in Ukraine has been heavily rhetorical and maybe not as concrete as it sometimes could be. That all said, of course, the U.S. government has been deeply involved with the Ukrainian government for the last 20 years. You do have a lot of coordination and different policies that continue to the extent that there are ongoing conversations and policies being executed with the Kiev government. That would not be terribly surprising.
It appears, though, and this is something I keep going back to, that Ukraine's like this football being tossed back and forth between these immense powers, Russia and the United States. And you and I had a chance to talk beforehand. It seems like the focus is on those two sides, and rather than the country itself. If either of these big countries, Russia, the United States, were to intervene in a way that would be helpful, what do you think that would be? Just everyone sitting down at the table trying to carve something out? I mean, what is the answer here?
Well, yeah, the foreign minister of Germany, Steinmeier, has recently called for a return to Geneva and a second set of conversations there in Geneva. The first set of conversations didn't get very far, so I think it'll be difficult to get everybody back to the table. But that's probably the best idea. That's probably the best thing to do. Sit down, try to draw back from a support for this interim government alone, try to draw Russia in to a conversation about the future of that country. They said they want a federalized government. Well, instead of breaking off parts of the country, why not sit down in Geneva and try to figure out constitutionally what would that look like, how would it operate, what's a viable way to create a state that's going to have some sustainable hope of survival.
We're just about out of time, but I have to ask you, Angela Merkel was just here in Washington. She's still talking to Putin and, of course, Obama. Can she be pivotal in trying to work something out, do you think?
She's got a key role to play to the extent that sanctions remain an important part of the Western response to Russian behavior. She has most exposure in terms of her economy. So, yes, I think she does have an important role to play. And I think to the extent you have the foreign minister of Germany calling for these talks, I think that's a really good sign.
All right. Thanks so much for coming in. I'm sure we'll be talking again in the near future. This story is not going away.